Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Football Cafe's Buy Low, Sell High Week 9 podcast. Here to give you a few names that you should be looking to acquire, a few names you should be looking to possibly sell in fantasy leagues, and one guy worth keeping an eye on or stashing. I'm your host, Josh Shepardson, and you can follow me on Twitter, where I post as at BChat50. And without further ado, let's go into one of the buy low targets, and that's Melvin Gordon, the rookie from drafted in the first round by the Chargers, has had a ho-hum at best rookie season. Really hasn't been an integral part of their offense. They've been a very pass-happy unit with Philip Rivers leading the league in pass attempts, but the absence of Keenan Allen for the rest of the year could throw a wrench into those plans. And Melvin Gordon's coming off of a game in which he touched the ball 23 times. Really a high watermark for him. 61 yards from scrimmage, not exactly something worth getting super excited about, but the fact that he touched the ball quite a bit last week could be an indication that they recognize that they're going to have to create a little bit more balance without their top receiver. Gordon was an excellent college runner. In 2013, he totaled he ran for, in his final two seasons of college football, ran for 1,609 yards and 7.8 yards per carry, and a dozen touchdowns 2 years ago. And last year he totaled 2,587 yards, a 7.5 yards a clip with 29 touchdowns. So a guy who really produced at the college level, had big expectations coming into the year, but hasn't quite lived up to those yet. But I mean, the NFL is quite the learning curve for any player. Running backs do tend, it seems, to have an easier time adjusting to the league. Isn't always the case. Melvin Gordon has obviously not lit the world on fire. Fairly cheap at this point, but if his touches go up, then you can expect more production. I mean, volume basically equals production. And with the rash of injuries around the league to running backs, now's the time to kick the tires on a guy like Gordon, whose stock could be on the rise. Next up is another running back. And earlier in the week when I wrote this, it was debated what would happen at the Jets quarterback situation. Ryan Fitzpatrick has ligament damage in his non-throwing thumb. Geno Smith was nicked up, and it really wasn't clear who would be under center, how healthy either of them would be. At this point in time, we know that Ryan Fitzpatrick is expected to start this weekend. Geno Smith is healthy enough to serve as his backup. And the questions that were there at quarterback are no longer there, so there's a little bit less risk with grabbing Chris Ivory at this point, since defenses will still have to respect the passing game. But I do still think that there's a buy low window after two lackluster performances, in which he's rushed for 58 yards in total on 32 carries the last 2 weeks. That's a really ugly yards per carry. But for the season, he's got 518 yards rushing at 4.5 yards per carry. So we're talking about a blip on the radar over the last 2 weeks. Ivory, and if there is a positive to be drawn from that poor 2-week stretch, it's that he got the ball 32 times still on the ground. So they aren't afraid to continue to feed him the rock and give him a chance to shake out of a bad game. And this team is built on defense and running the football. So Chris Ivory, coming off of 2 bad games, might be able to get him a little bit cheaper than you should otherwise be able to. And I would advocate trying to buy him now before this weekend if you can get him. If he turns in another ho-hum performance, that buy low window may stay open, but if he goes out and has a big game this weekend, going to be a little bit tougher to get him, especially when you'll see gamers looking back at the full season log and a little bit more dismissive of the last 2 weeks if he does have a good performance this weekend. As far as selling high, I would advocate cashing out on Brandin Cooks. Cooks was a very popular breakout candidate coming into year 2 as a receiver this season, and or year 2 in the NFL this season, I should say. He's been a receiver for numerous seasons, dating back to his college career, but was productive last year, expected to take on a bigger role this year. He has taken on a bigger role. He is the most targeted member of the Saints. He does lead the team in receiving yards, and he does have a few touchdowns on the season. But for the year, he's eclipsed 100 yards just one time. He's reached double-digit targets just one time this season. And overall, the statistical line for him is more good than great. And he's inconsistent week to week. He is coming off of good performances in 3 of his last 4 contests. So the window's certainly open for moving him. And I think that my advice would be to move him for a steadier producer, maybe a guy that's a little bit undervalued. I highlighted Jordan Matthews as a potential trade target. Obviously not in a 1-for-1. Cooks has outperformed Matthews this year, but I think that going forward, Matthews may be able to outproduce Cooks for the rest of the year, and you could probably get a little bit of something extra with Matthews, and that's the route that I would go. But if you need help at running back, if you need help at tight end or another position, maybe quarterback, pedal Cooks for something else. But I think that this is the high water mark for cashing out on Cooks. I don't think he's going to be terrible the rest of the season, but the inconsistencies are enough for me to go ahead and advocate cashing out on him. Next up for the sell options is selling high options is Larry Fitzgerald, and this is not meant as a knock against Fitz. He's having a tremendous year. He and Carson Palmer are both playing at an exceptional level, Pro Bowl caliber level. Fitz is played like one of the best receivers in the league, and he has been one of the best receivers in the league throughout much of his career, save for a few seasons with some absolute duds at quarterback for the Cardinals. But basically, whenever he's had a good quarterback under center, he has made things happen, and that's the case this year. This week he's on bye, though, and if you can sell him during this bye week, you can pick up an extra week of production, and you can cash out on a guy who really hasn't had to deal with the full complement of pass catchers in that offense just yet this year, or at least fully healthy. Starting the year, Michael Floyd was dealing with broken fingers on his hand, and he wasn't productive the first few weeks of the season. He's emerged a bit the last few weeks. John Brown, dealing with a hamstring injury, has played at less than 100%. Has played well at less than 100%. Didn't play last week, and it was the Fitz and Michael Floyd show. Coming out of the bye, you'd expect Brown to be healthier. We know Floyd is healthier at this point. And if you've got Fitz, Floyd, and Brown, as well as a very productive running game with Chris Johnson in the backfield, that's a lot of mouths to feed. And it's hard to imagine that Fitz is going to continue to see the volume of work that he's seen and be as productive as he's been. He's also been highly efficient, so I'm not advocating giving Fitz away. He doesn't need a huge workload, a huge volume of work to be productive, to play like a wide receiver 1. But if you can sell him at his current value before other guys start to emerge and cut into his production potentially a little bit, guys like Michael Floyd and John Brown, both on the field together, I think that's the move to make, and especially if you can do it this week and pick up an extra week of production from somebody while Fitz is on bye. Finally, let's look at a stash candidate, a guy who I have advocated keeping an eye on in the past, guy who I've advocated grabbing and having on your roster, who just really hasn't gotten a chance to succeed. And I mean, I don't know what happens in practice. I don't know why he hasn't gotten a larger chunk of the workload in the backfields that he's been in. But Christine Michael gets the nod again, and it's more about the man in front of him and the man released this week from the Cowboys backfield than necessarily Michael. I've been a Michael fan based on the measurables and loving the fact that he's a big back that can run fast and basically lit up the combine. I sometimes have some biases towards guys like that, in favor of guys like that, willing to give them a little bit more leash than maybe they deserve. But in this case, just look at that backfield right now. Lance Dunbar is done for the year. Joseph Randle was cut. And Darren McFadden has never been a model of staying healthy. Last year he played 16 games, but that was primarily the function of him being a reserve running back. He just has not stayed healthy as a starter, and he's toted the rock more than 20, or received the rock more than 20 times in back-to-back games. That kind of workload for a guy who has a history of injury could eventually lead to him getting nicked up. And while I don't like to speculate on injuries, I'm not a doctor, we have a lengthy enough track record of McFadden being unable to stay healthy to suggest that Christine Michael will get a look at some point this year. And perhaps the Cowboys will wisen up and reduce his workload a little bit, just to try and keep him healthy, in which case Michael is the obvious primary beneficiary, is the backup back there. And if he succeeds in that backup role, maybe he muddies the situation and makes it more of a committee situation. But point being, Darren McFadden hasn't stayed healthy throughout much of his career. Having a backup back that's in an offense with a really talented offensive line that's eventually going to be getting Tony Romo back here in a few weeks, and just got Des Bryant back. things are trending upward for that Dallas offense, and having a guy like Michael as you're getting closer to the playoffs, if for goodness sakes, if he ends up getting a couple spot starts down the stretch with Darren McFadden nursing an injury, say weeks 11, 12, 13, you might have yourself a very nice flex option that you're just not going to find on the wire at that point of the season. So if you've got a bench spot to work with, if you're not dealing with injuries that require you to have a play now, fill in, Michael is arguably my favorite stash candidate at this point, one of my favorite handcuffs around the league right now, just because of the talent around him and the likelihood that he's going to see some time at some point. So that's going to wrap things up for this week's show. Check back next week as I'll have some more buy low and sell high candidates, and maybe a buy high candidate, maybe a stash candidate. Depends on what I'm feeling like. But good luck this week. Check out the fantasyfootballcafe.com for some great articles, some great content, and definitely our very active message board. So get on there, get in the forums, and have some fun. Good luck this week.